You're listening to the Full and Thriving podcast, a place where courageous women come to break free from food obsession, heal their relationship with their body, and strive to live a life that's present, lighthearted, and meaningful. If you're listening, my wish is that this podcast serves as a catalyst that inspires you to nourish your body, nurture your mind, and energize your spirit. I'm your host, Meg McCabe, a certified life coach and eating disorder recovery coach with a PhD in having a good time. Just kidding about that last part. Anyway, thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show. Today's guest is Olivia Soha. Olivia is an Australia-based Carolyn Costin Institute certified eating disorder recovery coach and the founder and director of Uncovery, which is her own eating disorder recovery coaching practice. Olivia has lived experience with an eating disorder and has since been dedicated to transforming her previous pain into purpose through her work. In this episode, Olivia shares her recovery story, which includes a spiritual awakening that changed her life. If you're wondering about the connection between spirituality and recovery, this episode is definitely worth listening to. I know that you are going to absolutely love this episode of the show. Hey, Olivia, how are you today?
Hey, Meg. I'm great. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's lovely to see you again. I know we connected a few months ago, and it was nice to meet another CCI coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few of us now dotted around the world, so it's really lovely to connect with others doing the same work and, making a difference for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like the CCI group of coaches were like all on the same team, and we support each other and we trust each other's work because of the amazing training we all had. So I love that we're all located all over the world as well. I feel like a global woman. I don't know if you ever feel that way.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, it's so important to have that community, I think, and to always have those people to come back to bounce off ideas. And it's really special work that we do and really unique. And it's important to have others to connect with on that for sure.
So important and helpful. It's been amazing having all of you kind of be on my team during this whole time. So lucky to have you on the show, and I'm excited to talk to you today. And I know that the listeners are too. So I know everyone just heard the intro, but I was wondering if you could tell me about your own background and your eating disorder story, because I know you are recovered yourself, and I think it's important to bring that into full picture.
Absolutely. Well, I just have to say, I've just seen this little owl sitting on your shoulder behind the camera there. And I know today we're talking about my story and a little bit more authentically than I perhaps shared before. Not because I don't want to, but I think, as we go through our healing journey and recovery, and that can be, getting to a place of being recovered, but then also by way of being human, there's so many more evolutions. And I guess a part of my healing journey, something I discovered along the way, was that I had a spirit animal, and that's an owl. And you've got a little owl behind you. So this is my little guide today.
I love that. When you see an owl, does that mean anything? Yeah. Like, does it mean you're on the right path or anything like that?
You got it. Yeah, you got it. That's what I see. Like, I might be going through something or trying to make a decision, and then I'll see a little owl somewhere, or see it in a window or on a sign. I'll go, okay, I'm on the right path. Everything's okay. It sounds a little woo-woo, but I don't know. I'm all for woo-woo these days. I don't know about you. But
Oh, me too. I am all about the woo, and I think it's really cool that you point that out, because the reason why I have the owl sitting behind me, no one can see this, but I have a little owl in my office, is because the owl is my little spirit guide, spirit animal as well. And it always means for me that I'm on the right path. And it's just that comfort. So when I see an owl out and about in the world, and they're actually everywhere, once you notice something is important to you, you kind of see it more out in the world. it always gives me a little bit of peace knowing, okay, I'm on the right path in my journey. I'm being guided. It's nice. It gives me peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to me.
So,
Yeah.
so did the owl emerge during your recovery? Like, was that when the owl like revealed itself to you as a guide?
You know what? I don't remember when it started. I feel like it was perhaps at the tail end of my recovery when I started to get, I don't know, find a little bit more meaning and purpose in my life and started to become a little bit more interested in spirituality and, these other parts of my life that I hadn't really discovered or delved into before. But I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. So I will wind it back and, answer the question from before. But I guess sharing a little bit about my eating disorder journey. So I'll talk to when it started. And, these days when I tell my story, it changes all the time because of the discoveries I have along the way. And in recent years, the more I've been doing this work as a recovery coach, I've learned that my eating disorder actually started at a much younger age than I used to talk about. And I think I was about 10 or 11 years old when I first started having difficulties with food. And it originally started when my brother had choked on meat. And so for me, being such a sensitive child, he was also anaphylactic to nuts. I became so hyper aware of food and it possibly being dangerous. Mm-hmm. So, food being harmful rather than something that was nourishing. And so over the years, I started exhibiting more so ARFID traits, which back then, 20 years ago, wasn't really spoken about, wasn't, known about. So it was just, oh, this child has anxiety and okay, she's not eating at the moment. That's unusual. So now when I tell my story, I can see that actually started much younger, which actually helped in my recovery journey to have more empathy towards myself, that this wasn't just an isolated experience or it wasn't just about being superficial, which is what I thought it was, just about my body and my looks, but it was actually more so about some experiences that I had growing up. And I've definitely learned throughout my journey that there's a much bigger picture. And often we don't see that about our recovery until we join the dots backwards. So in terms of where it originated from, it was around that time. But I guess the peak of my eating disorder was when I was 19, 20, 21, when I was finishing school and, I really lacked self-confidence. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what value I had to offer the world. And I finished school. I was planning to study psychology, but I just didn't feel like I knew what it was about psychology that I was interested in. And I felt like, I don't know, like I like helping people, but there's something missing for me. And so going traveling was really great. And then spending some time afterwards just working. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to see how I go working, getting out into the workforce and see if that meaning comes, like that reason why. I definitely got that in that part of my journey as I was trying to find myself. That was when that part of my eating disorder that was more restrictive and more so about trying to be healthy and, being the best at exercise and, putting all my energy into that, thinking it was a good thing, that actually took me into, a really dark place. And so that's kind of how it evolved over the years. But that's, at the point in time when I did kind of plunge into a pretty dark place.
Fascinating. So in that moment, were you aware that you had an eating disorder at this time, or were you kind of going through the motions, not thinking you had an issue?
Totally going through the motions, thinking I didn't have an issue. I was like, I'm totally on top of the world. Like I'm taking care of myself. I'm eating well. I'm exercising. I've got a job. But during that time, I was starting to become more socially isolated. And because at that time, I'd also moved from living closer to my friends and my boyfriend at the time to then moving about an hour away with my mum. I didn't really have that mirror of my friends and my relationships. It was all just about me being focused on myself. And again, there was no meaning. There was no, like I had a job, but it was nothing I really loved. And so all the energy just kept going further and further into, I've got to be better at eating. I've got to be better at exercising. And I was trying to get better and better at that. And I was totally blinded to the fact that, I was plummeting. And, it wasn't until my mum, really had let's call it an intervention with me. And I recite this moment to my clients actually, and I call it the hairdryer moment. It sounds kind of crazy, but we had this moment where, I'd been out in the morning, I came back maybe 6:30, 7:00, and she was in her bedroom. She was drying her hair, and she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "Where have you been?" And I just kind of like shrugged it off. I don't know, trying to skirt around where I actually had been because there was a part of me that knew. And she threw her hairdryer to the ground, like really hard. And my mum is a very sweet woman and she does not do that. So in my mind, I was like, wow, okay. And that there's something going on here. And she said, you need to get help. Like, this is not normal. It's not normal what you're doing. So I don't feel like I ever really chose to get help. It was like, all right, now let's put things in motion. What do we need to do? Dietitian and psychologist, putting a team together. So there was no choice for me in that. It was, we need to fix what's going on right now.
Wow. Okay. So it all kind of became revealed to you suddenly that this was a problem because your mom had the hairdryer moment, which I love that you named it that. So how did you feel in that moment when she's telling you you have a problem? Did she use the words eating disorder? Could she identify it for you? Like, where was your head at with that?
I don't think she really knew at that point, and neither did I, but we knew something. Well, she knew something was wrong. And I was, I think, still pretty oblivious to the fact that this was harmful because I didn't feel like I was having any physical symptoms that were an issue. I thought, oh, well, I'm just healthy or I'm just, fit. And so that I think that's where, a lot of people and probably a lot of your listeners can find themselves stuck sometimes because that can be a place where, a society that might be normalized, be a place where you're really focused on exercise and health. And so for me, because I had someone in my life that was able to say, no, this is not okay, we did start getting help at that point, but I still couldn't see it. And I remember when I started seeing a dietitian and started seeing a psychologist who was specialized, I was like, I don't want to do what you're telling me. I don't eat that food. That's not good for me. Thinking I was a know-it-all and thinking I was smarter than my dietitian.
Oh.
Heard that before?
I've got a lot of mixed feelings about dietitians in the past before I was recovered.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so did you have kind of that moral identity related to your eating disorder as well? Like this eating disorder or my relationship with food makes me better than other people, makes me smarter, makes me, I don't know, healthier?
I think so. And I think now, as I said before, joining the dots backwards, I was trying to draw some sort of a meaning, some sort of a connection, some sort of identity from being controlled with my eating healthy, exercising, having discipline, because I didn't know who I was in the world. And I didn't feel like I had anything else to talk about. I never had that thing, right? And so I almost felt like when I had to face this treatment that I had something that they were trying to take away from me that I worked so hard for. And I was worried about, well, what's my identity then? If it doesn't take away my identity, well, I'm going to be nothing again. So tell me I'm wrong. So yeah, of course, when I met the dietitian and the psychologist, I was super resistant to anything they were trying to explain to me about food or about the food pyramid. And I was like, I remember she showed me on the walls, like, here is what you should be eating and what it should look like. It's like, nah. Nah. Different diet, please.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, that's really connective, I think, and relatable because it sounds like you really did turn towards exercise and diet, or was it just dieting? It was both, right?
Both. Mhm.
To create that identity for you. So it must have felt a little threatening to like tell you it's wrong and that it needs to go away and you need to stop. So I'm sure it must have brought up a lot of emotions for you and fears about, okay, what's going to happen if I actually do get rid of this thing?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It was super scary. And yeah, I think in hindsight, I can see it all now, but it's so hard when you're in it. It's really hard when you're in an experience to actually step back and see what's really going on. And I think that's something really cool that we can do as recovery coaches is we can help people to step back and see an experience, maybe through, our own stories as well, but also helping them to step back and be the observing witness of their own story and to see what's happening. I wish I had a recovery coach or someone then that could say, hey, like, I know what you're experiencing and this is what I experienced, but I'd never met anyone at that time. So yeah, I think that's why
Yeah.
it's so cool we can do this.
Yeah. It's so cool. I had nobody either in my life who I knew had gone through an eating disorder. I had only seen videos in health class and thought everyone they portrayed in the videos were totally nuts. And then suddenly I found myself in that position and I was like, I'm that girl. What? And I was very good. I was judgmental of myself. But yeah, it's really lonely when you don't know anyone else in that place.
Mm-hmm. I had a similar experience. I remember, watching daytime TV, watching Dr. Phil when I was 16 and sitting there with my bowl of pasta and they're interviewing a girl and my mum and she has an eating disorder and I'm thinking, I'd never get an eating disorder. I love food too much. It just goes to show like it's not a choice, it is totally not a choice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jarring to think back because I have exact similar moments where I was like, wow, these women with eating disorders, what's going on with them? And then like a few years later, you're in their shoes living that life and it's not something you chose. So, but I am really curious to continue with this story because as of right now, from a listener's standpoint, you're in treatment, you're resistant to it. I'm really curious. When did you let go and kind of surrender to the process? Like, this is legitimate. I actually have an eating disorder. I need to get better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really good question. And, reflecting on that part of my journey, things didn't get better from that point. I felt like I started to hold on more tightly. I started to grip more tightly onto the eating disorder because I felt like it was being created as this bad thing and I needed to protect it. Now, at this point, I didn't call it an eating disorder, right? Like it was me. Yeah. And again, a lot of our listeners will experience that same thing, but it's just me and I'm just doing this stuff, right? So it was at that point when things started to get worse and I was living with my mum at the time and I had to move from living with my mum to living with my dad because she couldn't manage it all on her own. Now, I was an adult at this time, so I think it's really important to say that. I really needed help and I really felt at that point in time quite infantilized. Like I felt like a child that needed to be taken care of as much as I didn't want to. So I remember I was diagnosed probably with the eating disorder on Christmas Eve of 2014. And it was from that point onwards that I felt like I need to live, now I need to live this identity of an eating disorder. And it started to get stronger and stronger. And really, I had to leave my job at the time because I couldn't really keep it up. And I moved in with my dad. And because I didn't have anything that I was focusing on in terms of work, which I think was maintaining some sort of normality in my life, I went straight into that eating disorder, head on. And because I was home by myself, for 3 months, my dad was at work, he was taking care of me, but that's all I could think about. All that was important on a day-to-day basis was my food, my exercise. That was about it. So I wasn't in recovery. I wasn't focusing on recovery. I was getting worse at that point. So that was December to February, March. My grandfather was really sick at the same time. And he passed away, I think it was maybe late Feb, early March. And I remember going to see him at the nursing home, and he'd just been, in an extremely painful state and, crying and all of that. And I couldn't feel it. I sat there, I held his hand whilst he was screaming and moaning, and I couldn't feel him. I was not sad. And it struck me in that moment that, why don't I care? Like, I totally cared. Like, I was heartbroken, but there's such a disconnect in emotion there, right? So, that next week is kind of a blur for me. So he passed away a few days later. His funeral was a week later. I remember being at his funeral again and just feeling like I was there, but I wasn't there. Just this ghost myself walking around. And, very quickly after that, I landed myself in treatment. And if you ask about that moment that I let go, it was the night before I went into treatment. I didn't know it was coming the following day, but I had this thought come to my mind, and I don't know what it was, but I had this, maybe let's call it a voice, a message: you need to go into treatment and you need to tell your parents that. Like, I was worried. I was scared at that point, really, really scared. And something shifted in me that was like, okay, you've just got to do it. So I said to my dad, please help me. I need help. And and he did. And again, another blur of the next 10 days. But you asked the question, when did you let go? I think around that point, but there's many letting go points along the way, but that was one significant one.
What a touching story, especially since it's almost like your grandfather's death aided in that realization that you needed to get help, right? And it's heartbreaking to know that you felt you were sad that he died, but you didn't feel into it or really feel that. And that was the moment where things started to shift. It does speak a lot to at least my spirituality stories like that, like just recognizing that there are some moments that change everything. And also those moments where your inner voice is so loud that you can't help but honor it and listen to it. My story reflects a very similar thing. I heard my healthy self, I call it my healthy self, just like screaming at me. And I think I share this on my podcast, like sprinkled that throughout. But I was living in a modeling apartment in New York and using behaviors all the time and torturing myself, essentially trying to get this thin ideal in the 2000s. So it was like very horrible time to be a runway model. And essentially my healthy self said this. I had a strong message voice. I've called it God. I've called it my healthy voice. It's just some aha moment where that voice said, you need to leave now. And I packed up my bags the next day and I moved home to start recovery. And so you and I have very similar stories where that message was so clear. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, goosebumps. Pretty amazing. So on that note related to spirituality and recovery, because we're kind of at both parts of that in your journey, what was your recovery like for you? And how did spirituality come into play?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a household that, with my mom in particular, she was quite spiritual and she was always, searching for meaning and, doing a lot of reading. And I was quite resistant to it as a child. I didn't have a religious household, but there were lots of different concepts that were in my life, but I didn't really want to know about it when I was younger. So I had a bit of a wall up to anything that was spiritual. And reflecting now, I wanted to find my own pathway there. And I wanted to find what that looked like for me, separate to what my mum wanted, what she was doing in her life. But I guess, just continuing on from where that story got super spiritual, I actually, for the following 10 days, actually, I had some really interesting experiences that, again, this is the first time I've talked about this in a public place. And so this is a really, really important part of my journey. And I think it's really important that I share it. I don't know who this is going to touch or who it's going to meet, but over the next 10 days whilst in treatment, because my body had gone through such a shock, I started to lose touch with reality. So a part of that experience was that I started to receive, some messages, and I was seeing things and hearing things that weren't a part of our physical plane. And so that for me was so scary. And I felt in a way that I was almost scared into recovery. But at that same time, those messages that I received were really, really powerful. And, I had this experience of, I thought I was dying. I thought I was going to die. And I had this experience of a light come towards me, and it was a really bright light. And I had this feeling of acceptance. Like it accepted, okay, I'm going to die. That's it. I smelled like roses, and I'd never heard of anything like this before. So I didn't create this. And I had this like feeling of peace come over me and acceptance. And I called my mom. I literally called my mom, scared the absolute crap out of her. But something happened in that moment where I felt like I was shocked back into reality. And so I kept kind of going to this place where I felt like, okay, I'm at this point where I can choose. Am I going to go or am I going to stay? Whether this is true or not, I don't know. I don't know to this point, in my life now, what that really was, but I know it was really a really important message. And so over the next 10 days, I had a few different messages like this, or, visions, whatever you want to call it, that really scared me. But also reflecting on it, I can see that was my choice point, right? Like we talk about choice points in recovery, but on a spiritual level, I felt like I chose to stay. And one of the other experiences that I had as a part of that was I received this message, and this is a really interesting one, but I wasn't talking for a while, in that place. I was so consumed in my mind, no one could really get through to me. But when I started talking again, it was like I had this revelation, and I was so excited I had to share it with everybody. And the message was, everything equals love. And I was like, my God, I've got to hear this. Everything equals love. And then when I told like my family, they were like, okay, yep. But, for me, it was such an important thing. And I know other people now have spiritual experiences. That's often a message that they can receive too. And so for me, that's really special. And, the other message that I received at that time was that if I choose to stay on this planet, that I need to help people, that I'm going to somehow do something with my experience that is going to help people. And, this is 8 years ago, me not even knowing what was going on, not even seeing or understanding how am I ever going to get out of this place? Like, this is rock bottom. So I didn't know what that was, but I had that message. You're going to stay, you're going to choose it, and you're going to help people. And, this is what I do now. But that was the choice point, the letting go, the turning point, that not that the rest of the journey was easy, but it informs everything that I do now. And yeah, I don't really share that because it's kind of hard to share, for those kinds of experiences that can be really vulnerable and really hard to put into words. Yeah, I often shy away from it, but there you go.
Gosh, me. I'm so grateful that you have decided to share this part of your journey to the listeners of this show for the first time. Thank you. I know it's really vulnerable to talk about things that you've never opened up about before in a public way. So thank you for that. What a beautiful experience to have those life-changing messages come through to you and to have that choice point and know in your heart that you made that decision on a spiritual level. It's just gorgeous and hopefully motivating to others. Sometimes doing something scary can result in beautiful transformation and growth, which is what's reflected in your story. So while you were in treatment, first of all, I am so curious about these other visions you had. Did you have any others you wanted to share?
Well, you know what? There was a few along the way, but for me, it lasted a while. Like I kind of stayed in this state for about a month. And I felt at that point like I was really, spiritually connected, which was scary too, because I was experiencing different things that other people were telling me were happening around me. But yeah, there was definitely things that I experienced and messages that I received that are quite interesting. And I'm so curious about them now. And given I'm so far away from that, I feel like now I'm going through this new discovery phase of my story and understanding like, wow, that is so cool that I experienced that. What happened? Like, what was that? Someone give me the answer. What was that? But yeah, some of the experiences also had some religious background. And I was baptized Catholic. As a child, I went to a Catholic primary school until grade 2, but nothing else really in my life was religious. And some of the messages did have, messages that were around like God and Jesus and things like that. But, in my conscious mind and in my learning and my understanding, I don't really have a lot of education around. So again, I have this curiosity and thirst now to understand what was this experience that I went through and why did it have also this religious messaging around it.
Mm.
So yeah, this is still a discovery process right now.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's almost making me speechless because I can't answer that question for you either, although I wish I could. It's part of your path. And I think it's just, again, a really beautiful piece of your journey. We're happy to hear and thankful to hear. So when you emerge out of recovery, you've had these really touching moments that connect you with your spirituality. You leave recovery, at least treatment. You leave treatment. And then what's life like? What was that like for you?
Yeah. When I left treatment, it was, I want to say, it was all sunshine and roses and daisies, but I feel like it was even harder than it was before because, as I mentioned earlier, this was something that gave me an identity, right? Like my way of living. Although I had these spiritual experiences, they hadn't fully integrated. And I felt like I was left with someone who was in a different body that I had known before, that I created value around, that I had an identity around, that I couldn't recognize. And so because I also didn't have anyone I could really speak to who could say, yes, okay, this is normal. You're going to now go through a process where you're learning to accept your body and learning to, I guess, take care of yourself in a respectful way and a way that's going to be life-giving, not life-depleting. I plunged into a pretty dark place again. So again, it was another 3 months living with my dad where I was just so depressed and so upset all the time and just desperate for some sort of way out. And, my spiritual experience was still with me and I knew it was there in the background. It wasn't like it was providing much relief at that point in time. And, for me, really at that point in my journey, I reached a new rock bottom. Like that was rocky bottom there. And I also remember I was having a moment with myself going, okay, well, you can't get any worse. Like you've done everything now. The only way is up. So just give it a go, but just do something. Because I was not working, I was not studying, I was not connecting with my friends. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't have any clothes that fit me. I just felt like this shell of myself, and then had also gone through this change in hospital and then in my treatment that I didn't recognize, right? So it was actually from that moment that when I put effort out and I really took a plunge, things started to open up, things started to happen for me. So I started applying for jobs, having nothing to wear. I was like, okay, well, this is the outfit. This is the job interview outfit. They're going to leave it. I started looking for places to live, to move into, a shared house with other people, and all things that were really, really difficult for me because I'd become so socially isolated. So I put myself out there in the world, and things did start opening up at that point. I got the job. I moved into a new house. I had some awesome housemates. I lived by the beach. Doors started opening, and I could see, like, okay, there's light now. And I think what was really important there, and also what could be really important to the listeners too, is that I had to, at that point, really take responsibility for my recovery and also make the choice that this is my life. And yeah, I can go back. I know what my eating disorder looks like. It's a living hell, but I've got an opportunity now to take what I've learned and, and to try and put together a good life for myself. I didn't know at that point what I wanted to do, but I knew I'd gone through such torment in my journey that I didn't want other people to go through that. And I wanted to be able to, I'd started working. I was still in, seeing my outpatient team at that time. But I started to think about, what can I do that's different that could help people on their journey? And, that's when I started researching, and I found Montenegro. And I saw that Montenegro and Carolyn has in her philosophy some spiritual components, finding meaning and purpose. And I'd always pictured this magical treatment facility in my mind that I then found in what Carolyn did, what she did. And so then all my energy, all the energy that I'd been putting into my eating disorder before that just went into researching and trying to find, there's got to be more to just going through, a regular treatment and putting on weight or, stopping behaviors. It's not really about that. My eating disorder journey was about finding my purpose and my passion and what I was here to do on this planet. And I guess from that moment, being able to see that there's other facilities and other people that also agree with that really helped me. And yeah, so things just started evolving from that point onwards.
Wow. I love that. So you found almost validation, like spirituality is part of this process. And Carolyn's work showed you that. And that's really amazing to hear. So I know along the line, you ended up, I believe, interning at Balance Treatment Center in New York City. And I need to bring this up because I'm a fan of Balance Treatment Center and everything that Mulaney Rogers is doing over there. So I wanted to know, how did that happen?
Oh, this is such a great story as well. How much time have we got? Well, so, at that point in time, I was really into it. I was researching. I had this newfound confidence that, all right, I'm someone that's gone through something really hard and is in recovery and edging towards what we'll call recovered. I firstly went overseas and I traveled around, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to go to the US. And this is someone who had no confidence before that. Now I wouldn't even call my mechanic to book my car in for service because I was so nervous. So now cold calling NIDA and Montenegro and other treatment centers and saying, okay, I'm this young Australian girl and I want to learn about what you do. We're really missing a lot of these. We're really far behind in Australia in terms of treatment goes for eating disorders. What do you do? Can I learn from you? And Mulaney, being the legend of an Aussie that she is, we didn't connect until I actually got back to Australia. But we set up, as soon as she heard that there's this young Australian girl that wants to learn about what we do, she was straight on a Skype call with me, because that's what we used back then. And I just told her about myself and, and what I wanted to do. And I remember within 5 minutes, like she was emotional and she was like, okay, well, let's figure it out. Why don't we just come to the US and you can intern here and figure it out. And yeah, so I packed my bags, literally put things in storage and moved to New York for 6 months, really not knowing. I had 3 weeks of accommodation that I knew about, but Mel is just awesome. And she's such a, close friend of mine now. We're always, talking in contact and, developing projects together and working on things behind the scenes still. But she wanted to take me in under her wing. And I think she saw a little bit of perhaps herself in me in being an Australian and wanting to be bold and brave and do something like she did when she moved to the US. So yeah, she really took care of me. And, I got to participate in groups there and tell my story for the first time. She would just throw me in the deep end. It was so good. Well, not really at the time, it was scary, but I had these opportunities to really see what she did with balance. And also, part of that journey was also being able to travel around the US and visit different treatment centers. I said to Melanie at one point, I really want to learn about what these other treatment centers do. And she said, okay, well, let's create a role for you. You're going to be our residential treatment liaison. And well, actually, I chose the name. She said, you can pick your titles. And, and you're going to represent us. And so they'll bring you over and you talk about balance and learn about, to have those relationships. That's really important in different levels of care. So yeah, I got to do that. It's just like wacky, when you think about it now.
I love that part of your journey. And on a spiritual level, I see so much in that story as well, because it shows that, first of all, you do transform in recovery. And when you do the hard things and take the risks, the world will open up to you in ways you don't even foresee. And, in a mind that was once consumed by diet culture and suffering, your mind can be opened up to focusing on new projects and having new relationships and meeting people from all over the world. It's just a really beautiful component. And I do see that as a spiritual component of your journey as well. I don't know if you could see it that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, we all have these opportunities in life, and I felt like I knew quite clearly what my pathway was because of what I'd experienced, because I had the opportunity to go, into a real place of darkness at such a young age. And so I'm really grateful for that, because that was very clearly presented to me that it was something that I needed to do. And I'll be honest with you, there's been times in my journey where I've really resisted that, where I've gone, this is too hard, but also knowing that I've got something really important to share. And that is also a product of me going through something hard. And you use this word transform. Yeah, transform pain into purpose, transform lived experience or something really hard that we go through into, like what we do now, a really purposeful career. And I think that is really exciting, that we can also be paving the way for other people who have stories, who have experiences that they might not know how to share or want to do something with, to be able to share their story and their pain and transform their lived experience into something that can help others. So, of course, that part of my journey, I think, was, you can't plan that, you can't plan that. Why would this person come onto my path and say, come move to America, we'll figure it out? Clients ask me regularly, like, oh, how can I do that? And well, I don't know, it just kind of happens. So yeah, it's a part of that evolving picture. And I always trust that. And, a little owl behind you here, when I got onto this call today, a little part of me was nervous about being really vulnerable. And then that's my message, that it's okay. This is a part of your pain that you're transforming into this, I'm sure meet people and touch people in some way. But yeah.
I feel like with recovery as well. One thing helped me feel spiritually connected was seeing the big picture in life. Like, I feel like when you can look back at your journey, it helps to see how it all fits together. And again, you can't always plan it. You almost have to trust that you're going through this really difficult period of your life that's going to teach you so much and bring you a new life. And you just have to trust that process. And it's really scary, but worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Taking risks, putting yourself out there, trusting. Yeah. All of those things are really, really important. And yeah, finding some way that you can connect to meaning and spirituality that works for you, because I think we're all so different. And sometimes when we bring up this word spirituality, people might put up a bit of a wall and go, well, I'm not spiritual. I don't believe in any of that stuff. And, that's really, so you're smiling then. I'm like, that's an important part of my work too, to help people find what that is for them and help to kind of take that wall down a little bit and find some sort of a way to anchor or connect to meaning. And then I don't even use the word spiritual, to be honest, that often in these kinds of settings, but to find a sense of connection to their life force and their essence that can help them in their recovery journey, help them to move from being stuck in their eating disorder and maybe more so in their ego or their physical, it's all just about the external world and the physical body, to, transcending to a more deeper level and, finding that meaning.
So valuable and so true. And I know it's kind of interesting, this talk about spirituality, because it isn't always brought up. And I think people get afraid to talk about it because there's that reaction about maybe it's sounding very religious. But in reality, spirituality and religion, they can be connected or they can be totally separate. And you can be one or the other, or you can be both. And I think that's where it becomes this like topic people aren't afraid to face head on. I don't know if you resonate with that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I always try to approach it in a way that, well, firstly, because I came from a place of being someone that didn't want to face this idea of spirituality or didn't want to hear about it because it was something I couldn't see. And to be honest, I was kind of scared of it too. I'm scared of the unknown. I don't want to know about things that I can't see. So I had a bit of a wall up to it. But, the way that I try and approach it, with my clients in the way that I work is to really help someone just to find what is meaningful to them. And I think we're also unique in that way, and finding that meaning, what they want to be able to do in the world, they're good at. It's not just about being good at like a particular job or a sport, but, what do you feel like your qualities are that people point out about you? What do people love about you? I know for me, another thing that I did in my recovery was I did a workshop with a psychologist that took me through understanding my core values. And so helping people to be able to look at it in that way, okay, how can we find our core values? For me, what really came out, what my core driver was, I don't remember all of it now, but it was around helping people, right? So for me, I'm trying to help people to see, okay, what gives you meaning? What is it about helping people that makes you feel good, or what makes me feel good? So we don't have to go like woo-woo unless someone wants to go woo-woo, but finding ways that are really tangible that we can help people to kind of connect to that. And maybe we don't know what the bigger picture is. Maybe someone in their recovery journey doesn't know what's coming next for them. What's their job and like, what are they going to do in their, for their uni degree, whatever that is. But, what's meaningful for me now? What wouldn't I want to lose about myself that I want to carry forward? And then there's so many ways that we can help people to connect to their soul self, to connect to that deeper part of them that can really be through things that everyone knows, like being in nature, listening to music. Is it is it dancing? Is it being around friends? Is it being on your own? Is it doing meditation? Is it going to a concert? I don't know. Like it can be so different. So I feel like it's my job to help people create that picture for themselves and find a way to connect to what that meaning is for them.
I love that. Yeah, it is. It is really all about what is meaningful to you at this moment. And I think the other question you asked that's really interesting too is what's the part of you you don't want to lose? What's the part of you you want to carry through life? I think that's such a beautiful question to reflect on. So, everyone listening, definitely ask yourselves those two questions. And Olivia, you mentioned ways people can kind of stir up their spiritual side and get that going. I'm curious, do you have ways in your life that you kind of evoke your own spirituality or connect to your spirituality?
Yeah, you know what? It's really changed over the years. I think when I first started my spiritual journey in that phase of my recovery where I was taking responsibility, living on my own, I started doing things like yin yoga. And I remember at that time, I thought it was the biggest waste of time. Like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here in my child's pose and nothing's happening. Like, what for? But eventually, it took me 4 months of doing yin yoga to realize, okay, maybe the whole point is for me to actually be able to sit here in myself, in my thoughts, and be okay with that. So some things like that, yoga, that's something to me that's carried throughout my journey that is a real anchor for me that I really love. The other thing that is a little bit more new in my spiritual journey, let's say, is I am currently at a women's circle and we're there's four of us and we all also have our own businesses. So we talk about things that are going on in our life and we share about that, but we also talk about things that are, deeper and have more meaning for us. And so that connection to women, connection to others that perhaps, on a similar journey in some ways is really helpful. So community, I think, something I always struggled with throughout my teen years and throughout my early adulthood was actually being able to connect to other women. I don't know really what that was about. Very self-conscious, never thought I was good enough, or I didn't think any girls liked me. So for me, this has been, really transformative part of my adult life and 29 now. Being able to change those narratives and find that connection with other women, I think is so important. So yeah, and also things like going to workshops. I mean, recently I went to Europe for 9 weeks and the beginning of my journey was a 5-day intensive personal development workshop with this institute called the Learning Love Institute, which is all about relationships and relating to ourselves and others. And it was actually called Living with Passion and Depth. So for me, doing these workshops along the way and my anchor points to learn about myself and beautiful setting in Siena to be able to do that. But yeah, so some of the things I do now.
So inspiring. I need to get myself in some workshops. I need to get myself in some women's circles. Where are they at? Let me go find them.
Yeah, yes, sure.
Wow. Olivia, this has been such a pleasure. I have truly enjoyed hearing so much of your story and, the bonus content that's new with just the add-on to your story. Thank you for being so vulnerable with us and sharing your spiritual side.
Thank you for providing this platform. I would say it was about 6 weeks ago that I put it out there to the universe, let's say, that I wanted to share my story a bit more authentically and vulnerably somehow in some way. And this idea of a podcast came to mind. And then, you sent me that message and invited me to listen. And I thought, okay, all right, now's the time. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been an honor. And I'm just grateful to have you in my circle of coaches that are globally connected. It's really nice. And again, thank you for being here. And I appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Meg. It's been a pleasure.